Could the reshuffle be an opportunity to reset the relationship between farmers and the government? The NFU president thinks so. And what's a reporter to do when a rare farmland bird is nowhere to be seen?
It's cracks, 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 cracks.
Ask the interviewee to do an impersonation, obviously. We'll hear about the efforts to conserve the corncrake later on. First today, unlicensed burning of moorland where there's deep peat is being banned in England. The government has confirmed that it's going ahead with plans to make land managers apply for licences if they want to burn vegetation where more than 30 centimetres of peat lies beneath. Previously, this only applied to areas with 40 centimetres. Burning is a traditional practice used for several reasons, including on grouse moors to encourage new heather growth. DEFRA says the new licensing regulations will increase the amount of protected peatland equal to the size of Devon. The Moorland Association's chief executive, Andrew Gilruth, told me he believes it's a misguided decision.
With climate change making vegetation tinder dry, having too much fuel can be fatal. And with G7, the White House and the EU all encouraging prescribed winter burning and grazing, but yet DEFRA is doing the opposite. And as it doubles down, almost in defiance of the science, and leaving even more vegetation on our hills is like handing matchboxes to arsonists. And after a year of record wildfires, next year threatens to be even worse. And clearly that isn't something that we support.
However, you mentioned climate change. Peat is one of the main carbon sinks for CO2. Isn't it much better to have healthy peat so that it's wet and it's storing carbon rather than having it dried out and set on fire? That's the way that DEFRA thinks, I think, about this.
And that's a very elegant point, Anna, because actually it is about storing the carbon and having wildfires, as is just experienced on the North York moors only in the last few weeks. You end up with a wildfire that actually burns the peat, whereas a prescribed controlled winter burn doesn't actually burn the peat at all. And that's very well documented.
Can't land managers simply apply for a licence to burn anyway? How much is this actually going to restrict the burning that goes on grouse moors, for instance?
Yes, so it'd be helpful to put this into perspective. The changes which are going to apply from next month, actually we're trebling the amount of land where precautionary winter burns require a licence. On the area where it is currently you require a licence, the introduction of the scheme resulted in a 71% reduction in the amount of burning and or cutting. And that's resulted in an increase in fuel loads, and that has become a stark warning. So re-wetting is a great idea, and our members have blocked over 7,000 kilometres of ditches. And we're keen on that. But the reality is you've also got to manage the surface fuel loads.
Andrew Gilruth from the Moorland Association. But Tom Lancaster from the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit welcomes the change.
Upland peat is one of our biggest carbon stores. But at the moment, because they are burnt and they're drained, that means that carbon is escaping. It's sort of increasing the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and contributing to climate change. Increasing the controls over when peatland vegetation is burnt can realise a whole suite of benefits, not just a safer store of carbon, but also those benefits in terms of reduced flood risk, cleaner water, and healthier peatland habitats for the nature that calls these landscapes home.
The Moorland Association has called this bureaucracy gone mad. And they say that, the controlled burning of heather, moorland, helps prevent wildfires.
I think the government have concluded the opposite, really, and the consultation response from them today clearly concludes that restoring peatlands to the wetland habitats that they should be is the best long-term strategy to increase the resilience of these landscapes to fire. Upland peatland habitats are wetland habitats. If you ever walk across a restored peatland blanket bog habitat, it will bounce, it will squelch under your feet. Whereas if you walk across a degraded peatland habitat that's drained and burnt, you could probably walk across it this summer in your carpet slippers. It would have been so dry. So restoring peatland habitats to the wetlands that they should be is, I think, on the balance of evidence, and this is what the government has concluded, is the best strategy in the long term to increase the resilience of our upland landscapes to the increased fire risk that climate change will bring.
Tom Lancaster from the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit. All week we're following the fortunes of farmland birds. More intensive farming is often cited as the reason for declining populations, but in some cases land abandonment or lack of production can affect species. The small brown corncrake used to be common in mainland Britain. It's now mainly restricted to the western edges of Scotland and Ireland. Crofters and conservation agencies are working together there to provide the best habitat and encourage breeding, as Nancy Nicholson reports from the Western Isles.
I'm wading around in damp grass on a beautiful morning on the Isle of Lewis, and this land is generally agreed to be ideal Corncrake territory, but there's no sign of any of them today. They're elusive, secretive birds, and you only really know they're around because of their distinctive call. And I'm with two people who know better than most what that sounds like. The RSPB's Community Officer Shona McClellan and Crofter Murdo McLean. Can you give me an impression, Shona, of the sound that we'd all like to be hearing right now?
Well, I'll try. It's cracks, 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 cracks.
And Murdo, would you agree? Is that right, or have you a better impression?
No, that sounds about it. Yeah, you hear that in the early evenings in the quiet. You hear that the males calling.
And do you remember? You're not old, but do you remember when there were more corncrakes, or is that more historical?
Yes, absolutely. I used to curse them when you'd be, couldn't get to sleep at night and all that because there were so many calling outside the window. But
How long ago was that?
That would have been back in the 70s and 80s. And they were, well, not thick on the ground, but certainly plenty of them. And the competing sounds with the birds was annoying, to say the least. But be quite happy to take that back now.
So, Shona, we understand, of course, that very intensive agriculture can be a problem for many farmland birds. But it's hardly intensive here, is it? So what's the problem?
What we're finding is that, there's small pockets that are really good for corncrakes, and then there's other areas maybe gone out of use. So even like the field across from here is that's what I would call rank grass, because it's just too thick. What that needs is grazing. There's been two projects on the go at the same time. There's been one where there's been land management agreements, 5-year ones, that have been agreed with local crofters. Murdo is one of those. And then we've got other crofters within the local area, about up to 50, who are in the Corncrake initiative.
What sort of measures have you been taking then, Murdo?
We follow the guidelines that the RSP have given us. We used to cut back on some of the vegetation. We're encouraging it to grow, so nettles and other things like that, which are ideal for the corncrake. Doing our best to provide loose cover, because if it's not loose enough for them to walk into and hide in, it's not very attractive to them. So,
is that geese coming now? They're very loud, aren't they? Right overhead, coming in. And so, as for you as a crofter then, is this good territory as well? There's a lot of grass here. Is that for your sheep?
That's it. We let the sheep in, so there's no competition between them. So we let the sheep in at a certain time of year, so that it's ideal for them coming in the spring. At this time of year, we can have the sheep in, but then later on we'll allow it to grow a bit more.
And do you get any support, any incentive to work with the RSPB?
There's a small payment, but it's not a huge amount, but it's more that's actually getting the nature back, getting the birds back to where it used to be. We planted yellow iris from about where we're standing down to the stream that's down the end there, and that grows quite tall, grows quite quickly at the right time of year and provides cover for the birds. So the corncrake like that, and you'll see there's some of them are still sprouting, but when we did plant that, the geese were pulling them out almost as fast as we were putting them in. So not all the birds are welcome. Yeah, but the corncrake certainly likes it. The geese, they can stay as far away as possible.
Echoing what many farmers think, crofter Murdo McLean. Could a new ministerial team at DEFRA be an opportunity for the farming industry's lobbying in Westminster? Farmers might argue there's plenty to lobby about, from inheritance tax to stalled environment payment schemes. Well, today is the National Farmers Union's Back British Farming Day, and to mark it, the NFU commissioned a survey of public attitudes towards farming. Of the 2,000 people surveyed, 92% said they felt it's important Britain has a productive farming sector. I asked the president of the NFU, Tom Bradshaw, how commissioning a public survey helps the industry.
Well, when we've got the overwhelming public support that we have with the survey work, the second most respected profession after nurses, 89% wanting us to produce more domestic food. I mean, these are numbers which give us incredible confidence when we go to government and say, not only does this matter to farmers, but it also matters to the public.
You met with the new Environment Secretary, Emma Reynolds, this week. Now, normally I know you would say, oh, everything was very positive in our meeting, but actually, how did you find her?
Well, I think that the new Secretary of State comes in with an opportunity. I hope that confidence has hit rock bottom and isn't going to get any worse. And now we have to jointly work together to say, right, how do we rebuild the confidence of the industry? How do we unlock the potential to deliver the food production that this country needs? And how can we make sure that right the way across government, food and farming is prioritised with the policies that will unlock the opportunities to invest for the future?
She's been around the Treasury a lot, hasn't she, Emma Reynolds? Does that help with some of the things that you want to talk about, like budgets and inheritance tax and funding for things like the sustainable farming incentive?
I think having that economic background is something that if DEFRA becomes a fully functioning economic department, it can only help us to put the economic case forward for the investment which is needed. We had a good conversation about how we drive the investment in infrastructure. There may be an opportunity there to try and unlock some of the policies that we need moving forwards at a time where we know to build the resilience of the food industry in the face of a changing climate, we need to invest huge amounts over the next decade.
We've got a new farm minister as well, Angela Eagle. Now, she doesn't come from a particularly farming background. She was moved from Borders to Food Security Minister. So do you think that that change is important or not?
Well, our job is to make sure we work with the new ministerial team in DEFRA to try and deliver the opportunities that we see for the future, to undo some of the challenges of the past, particularly around inheritance tax. And then let's work together to deliver for wider society. A thriving food industry is in everyone's interest. We look at population growth over the next 25 years, and we're expecting 7 million more people living on this island, and they all need to eat. So between us, we've got a real joint interest in how we make sure we can unlock the productivity opportunities and really drive the economic growth across every constituency in the United Kingdom.
You're being really upbeat, aren't you?
Well, there's no point being negative. I think that we've got to see this as the next stage. Hopefully it's a meaningful reset where we can undo the damage which has already been done. We can move forward.
When you say damage which has been done, Tom, what do you mean? Are you talking about inheritance tax or...?
The confidence of the industry is at rock bottom. Now, that's because the environmental tap has been turned off. There's no active schemes out there that anybody can apply for. We've got a vast number of countryside stewardship schemes ending at the end of this year with nothing to go into. We've got the inheritance tax policy. And so we can hopefully undo some of those and make it right with an inheritance tax policy which will mitigate the impacts on those most vulnerable.
You seem to be implying that you think there's an opportunity here to change the government's mind on that. Now, the government has been absolutely adamant up to this point that it will not change the inheritance tax legislation.
We've also been absolutely adamant that we won't be giving up, Anna. And I guess our job is to continue to try and influence those that are in a position to make a change. Now, if they're not willing to move on inheritance tax, but rebuilding that relationship is going to be incredibly challenging. But we have to see this as an opportunity for a reset to move forwards rather than as a negative.
NFU President Tom Bradshaw. That's all from us. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Sarah Swadling. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.